Well, welcome back everybody to another video on our little channel here. And everybody, I just wanted to say I am blown away by the attention that the Unicron video that we released, the attention that it has gotten. I mean, that's just part of our, I guess, our excitement as the Transformer fan base, right? Is if there's the potential of a Unicron coming out, in addition to the tidal wave that was announced like the day after that video came out, you know, because we do get 2 Titans a year. So I'm excited for the possibility that we might be getting an Armada Unicron, which, thinking about it, there's a lot of Unicron-tent on this secondary channel. And yes, you did hear that right, Unicron-tent. But speaking of that, guys, we do have a list today that we're going to go ahead and look at some Toxic Boys. We're also going to look at some guys that are the perfect troop builders. And as you can tell on the table, other dudes along the way. Now, starting off with Armada Hotshot and Armada Powerlinx Hotshot. The one thing that I think everybody was kind of curious about is why they went ahead and released this version of Jolt, since he technically goes with this version of Hotshot. Now, that might be because they're going to release the yellow Jolt somewhere down the line, but I think I can kind of sidestep that because I have the original Jolt that came with the other Powerlinx Hotshot I used to have. I think it works out pretty well because Hotshot seems to be one of the few Armada legacy figures that has a Powerlinx port, if not the only one. However, whatever the case is, I think that it's just nice that we're still able to use old mini-cons along with the new ones that we're going to be getting, which this version of Jolt is vastly superior to the original, which is not surprising at all. The one thing about Hotshot in the molding that I did notice was, if you look at his new face, it does have a wider grimace on the mouth as opposed to the more childish, smaller mouth, which they did that on the original Hotshot figure. Is they made his face look a lot older, because as we've discussed in previous videos, basically during Armada's run, they basically just gave Hot Rod's arc to Hotshot, and they wanted him to grow and mature, and by the end of Armada, he was commanding the combined fleet of Autobots and Decepticons in Galvatron and Optimus's absence while they were inside of Unicron.
Let's go, Prime.
Right. Galvatron and I are going inside Unicron's body to shut him down. Hotshot, take command.
Right. Inform all the Decepticons to follow Hotshot's orders.
Yes, sir. I already have, sir. Attention all units, this is it. We will now commence our assault on Unicron. Hotshot will command the attack. Prepare for battle. I repeat, prepare for battle, and good luck.
Now, one of the things that I particularly like about this set is the reddish-orange blast effects that come with this guy, and the fact that it comes with 2 of the Jetfire set, which is basically the medium piece, this piece right here, and then of course the long piece. The one thing I want to go ahead and ask you guys is, do you guys have this sort of deal where a lot of the blast effects have like curling edges on them? Which, I don't know, is that basically just because of the material that it's made of that causes it to curl around the edges? Which in some cases, that curling energy effect, it does kind of look cool. But overall, this Hot Rod, I think for the extra weapons which do store on his back, in addition to the blast effects and the Jolt, that's what really kind of tipped me over into buying this guy. So definitely have not regretted getting the Powerlinx Hotshot. And speaking of guys with crazy decos, how could we not dive into Sideswipe here? And the one thing that I think between him and Dead End, this one is probably more my favorite, just between the 2 of those, because I remember cars in the 90s having decos like this, like the Fade. That was a very popular thing. I mean, you still see it even today. But other things like the images on the hood and on the side doors, that was actually a thing, at least where I live. And the fact that this car represents stuff that is striking at my 90s nostalgia, I just absolutely love Sideswipe. So the fact that just his vehicle mode alone is cool enough, but his robot mode, as we'll see later on, yeah, this guy is an absolute win. And I kind of feel sad that he's short packed, because I think everybody should have the opportunity to experience this deco of this. You know, we've messed with the mold in other iterations, but to have this deco version, I kind of wish everybody would have the chance to experience it, because like I said, it's wild, it's wacky, and I totally am down with it. I love the blue wheels. That's just kind of something different. And yeah, so you can obviously tell by my excitement that I'm just super glad to have this iteration of Sideswipe. However, do not mistake that for me not liking this guy at all, because I will tell you, this Toxitron version of Dead End, especially with that giant G2 symbol, love that. The thing I dig about this is whenever I saw the original Dead End mold, I was rather blasé about it. And if you're wondering what blasé means, hey Siri, what's the definition of blasé?
Blasé means unimpressed or indifferent to something because one has experienced or seen it so often before.
And there you go. That is the perfect definition for what I was just describing. The original Dead End mold, it's okay, but I was not impressed by it. This guy with his livelier colors, it makes the guy more fun. And I don't know what it is, but I mean, just how the silvers and how the teals contrast with like the reds and just the little hits of black. I mean, it makes the guy look good. However, one day I was looking at this guy and it really dawned on me. I'm like, you know, I have seen that color scheme before. Just where have I seen it? And then it dawned on me, it's Rapido's color scheme. Although technically the prototype of Dead End that never got put into production, when you look at it, it looks like his weapon accessory and possibly other parts of him were this kind of seafoam green, whereas you can see on here they've just gone with like more of the straight sort of blue, slate blue. But I'm like, for the most part, I'm like, wow, it kind of makes me wonder, since they didn't put the original Dead End into production when they were making Rapido, did they just kind of let him kite his color scheme? However, retroactively, that does make me like him a little bit more, because yeah, he's playing off my nostalgia for my G2 Rapido over here. And so next on our docket is that of Generation 2 Laser Cycle. And the one thing I've always felt about Laser Cycle and Road Rocket is the fact that I like their head sculpts and how different they are from the original RC iteration of this mold. And especially about the armor bits on the forearms. The head kind of has this ninja aesthetic, but again, like I said, with the armor, it's kind of like a cross between a ninja and a samurai. And I think for the motorcycle mold, that works pretty well. Now, they did go ahead and gender flip Road Rocket, who was originally a dude, into a girl. But the history of Laser Cycle is a little bit interesting, because originally, in addition to the Orange Jazz, another version of him that they were thinking about releasing was him as one of the Laser Cycles, which Road Rocket, Road Pig, and others were classified as. That was a classification for the bikes in general. And so with that history in mind, because they have this Jazz out, they didn't want to have two on the shelves. So instead of making it a classification for the bikes, they just called this character Laser Cycle. Well, because it was originally intended to be a dude, and they haven't really addressed it as far as I know, I kind of like to think of this as maybe out of all the bikes, this is the only guy. And, you know, if you want to use it as a girl, that's totally cool, I understand. But for me personally, in my house, we're just going to pretend that Laser Cycle is a dude. However, when you put Laser Cycle with the rest of the bike molds, I think it looks really good. Now, obviously, you are noticing the giant Rhinox mounted on Laser Cycle's arm. That was because I never liked how, aside from like Alita and basically Flamewar, who, as you know, Fireglide is an axe and a rifle. Aside from those two, none of the other bike molds had laser rifles. They had the blades and stuff, and yeah, they say that the wheels can detach, and you know what, that is some weak sauce, because to me it doesn't look like a rifle. So let's just cut through the void there, because it's, like I said, that's weak sauce and it doesn't look like what it should. However, if you guys are noticing, especially with Road Rocket, and RC over here, you may be noticing some rifles that look familiar. Well, in our Ariel and Dion video, we gave both Orion and Dion a major upgrade by giving them the Optimus blasters, which left this red one for Road Rocket, and since blue and orange look good together, I just gave it to RC. Well, that left Laser Cycle with not having a weapon, so I thought, you know what, let's just kind of go crazy, and probably it would have looked better with the Skull Smasher one, but I do like the idea of Laser Cycle just having this giant cannon on their arm, and you know, I do love a little bit of ridiculous, so yeah, I think I'm going to roll with that. However, we did go ahead and mention Flamewar. And I have to say that having this girl for a couple days now, especially as a heroic Decepticon, because this is Shattered Glass, and it is kind of strange thinking of Flamewar being on the side of good, especially with the heroic Decepticons. And with kind of the gradient on the blast effect for Fireglide over here, that looks awesome. The little hits of purple, and just, I mean, the girl... She took the RC mold, which, you know, not a lot of people like this one. I obviously do. But you just look at how they totally upgraded it with this amazingly sick paint job. Even just looking at her here with Starscream, yeah, that just looks totally awesome. It's going to be interesting to see how she looks with the rest of the Shattered Glass Decepticons, because she's kind of the outlier, because Starscream, Soundwave, and Megatron are mostly white with like hits of blue. So the fact that they went with more of the positive universe's color scheme for her, again, that's why I bought it and I like it, but she's definitely going to be the one that sticks out like a sore thumb. Which in her fiction, they've kind of had like two different origins. One of those being that she only is sided with the Decepticons and because she wants to kill the evil Autobot that killed her captain, who was captain of the tidal wave. Whereas on the box, it says that she's actually a skilled warrior. She will go to any lengths necessary to keep the Decepticon legacy alive. So it's like, you know, I guess pick whichever origin you want. Which, speaking of the box, okay, I got this off of Amazon, and look at how this box got the doo-wah-duty beat out of it, man. And I'm like, okay, so they just shipped this thing in a plastic bag with minimal packaging surrounding it. It's like, you guys need to send this in a box that could take the beating instead of the actual product box. Now, thankfully, nothing's broken on her, but I know people in general, as far as our Transformers are going, sometimes they're just, if it's an enclosed product box, they're like slapping the sticker on top of it and like destroying the artwork, and then the box is getting, well, beat up like this. Even though mine was in a bubble package. Man, I'm telling you what, Amazon needs to step up their game. Now, if you all noticed, we were kind of having a pretty healthy mix of the Toxitron figures in conjunction with other figures, but I figured that it was about time we just went ahead and showed you the entire Toxitron collection all together. And I have to say that, as I mentioned with this guy, I love the wild 90s colors because I remember being alive in the 90s, and that was just the thing that was dominant throughout the decade. Was everybody was not afraid to wear bright, colorful things, and these guys are sort of like a reflection of that mentality. And correct me if I'm wrong, but is everybody that's part of this Toxitron collection all technically bad guys? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but does the fiction not mention how he uses the toxic matrix to revive every one of these boys from the swamp? And it does make me wonder, because these guys are the Generation 2 versions, and they're kind of playing off the rules that Universe played off of 20 years ago, where it's different iterations of the same characters coming together on one multiversal battlefield. And so technically you still have your Generation 1 Dead End, Mirage, Sideswipe, Jazz, Grimlock, and so on. And I'm like, you know what? I kind of wonder if, like, are the good guys under the thrall of Toxitron simply because of that? That's kind of a dark twist, and I mean, there is the possibility they could be freed one day, but I just kind of wondered about that. Now, like I said, because these are all Generation 2 figures, if they're the Decepticons you saw earlier, they're sporting the G2 Decepticon symbol, and I dig how prominent it is on Sideswipe. That looks really cool. The only one that is an exception in the Toxitron set is Grimlock, surprisingly enough. He's rocking the traditional Autobot logo, whereas we just saw with the other guys, they're rocking the G2 Autobot logo. The assortment they have is wild, and the colors are obviously amazing, and yeah, this has been one of the more fun subsets of my collection to actually complete. However, I did promise you a little bit of troop action, right? Well, here we can see one of my, again, Blase Deluxes versus one of the Voyagers that I am totally digging right now. Which, I mean, it's not really kind of a fair comparison because it basically just looks like the dude laying down, especially with the legs like that forming the front of the tank. So I was not too impressed. And robot mode is nothing to write home about either. But hey, if you guys like it, I'm actually glad for you. Now, some of the carryovers that you'll probably notice is obviously the belt buckle from Skullgrand, which, okay, I think it matches this guy's aesthetic, especially with this head. Now, I did go ahead and swap out the horns with the alternate head that comes on it, so these gray ones do just plug into the white skull. And I know that some people are saying that this kind of gives them a little bit of Death's Head vibe. However, I do like the horns reversed, and like I said, it's not like hard at all if you wanted to swap the horns out. And these sword guns, okay, first of all, I have a personal thing against sword guns. Either give them swords or give them guns. And for this guy, it would have worked to just give him 2 swords. However, I think that scene where Sideswipe was getting ready to go Assassin's Creed on Thundercracker and Skystreak, he pulls it off better than the guy they actually came with. Now, you can actually use the guns on his back instead of these, which does look a little bit better when you swap them and the sword's positions. And I do like how easy it is to swap the heads on these figures, especially him and the Autotrooper. It just slides right off, super easy. And you can kind of see the grooves in the back of the head, so whenever you just want to choose whichever one to go with, boom, like instantly on it. So anyway, that's the mediocre guy of the set.
Is nothing more than a mediocre, no, a less than average soldier.
Now, this is something that did kind of pique my interest in the set because I had the Quintesson Pit of Judgment set and it had the Baliff in it, which in that video we discussed some of the differences, but we'll go over them again. The most glaring obvious one is the difference in the shoulder armor. You've got the more angular one with the 2 giant spikes coming off of it, whereas this guy has got a little bit lesser detail for his shoulder armor, which the theory that I posted in that video is, are the Baliffs actually upgraded forms of Allicons? Because we never see them transform as far as I know. And the other thing is the top of the head. As you can see here, that the Baliff has a little bit more of a ridged head and it is reshaped aside from just the center. Well, actually, even that's a little bit different than this guy's. So yeah, the top of the head is different. And then behind the head here, that's the difference again to accommodate the different heads. Although this guy does come with a head just like this guy, and it does fit in here even without the ridge deal right here on the Baliff mold. So here we can see both of our boys finally converted into robot mode. This weapon accessory is what the Baliff originally came with. Now, here's where you start to see a little bit more of the difference, not only in the paint, especially with how the heads do differ. There's a lot more deco on this boy, plus how the chest does differ from your standard Allicon, and little bits of paint hits, like this guy has forearm paint, the standard Allicon does not. However, this does give you the option to do something that we've discussed on the other channel, which is basically the figure that that extra head comes with. You can use it. However, there could be a very similar mold that if you wanted to have this Allicon to have a fancier head, you can use it like that as well. And I do kind of prefer to have that as opposed to the stock one that it did come with. It adds a little bit of flash, which, speaking of that, there's a lot of stuff on this Baliff, which, I mean, the head sculpt and paint on that is sick also. But a lot of the stuff on this guy that is gray or washed out, I don't like it as well as I do the standard Allicon, because you notice, for instance, the fists are very light purple, whereas they're a little bit darker over here. The animal arms are darker on the Baliff, lighter over here. And you notice all the gray on this guy's legs, that this guy just has more of that gunmetal. I think the most egregious thing is probably the gray tail versus the green. Now, for a lot of those things that I was mentioning, not all of it, I can actually swap those parts out from the normal Allicon onto the Baliff, which I think I will. And so here you go. I have cannibalized the best out of both to make what I believe is the superior version of the Baliff. Now, a lot of the stuff that I did go ahead and swap out basically has this sort of peg system that it's a swivel peg, so you can just slide it off super easy. Now, what I did go ahead and swap out is the crotch guard. I did swap that out. It's just held on there by friction. You notice that I gave him the darker hands that the Allicon soldier originally had, and then I finally swapped the tails on this guy. So it's good that this figure is so universal that you can do that. So it was down to, do I want two guys that are okay and have features that make them both look good, or do I want to make one of them look superior and just let this guy chill with the leftovers? And obviously you can see what I chose. Okay, so this guy right here is a weird one, because I've come to start calling him Sky Streak, which is very similar to a Viacon named Spy Streak. But as far as I know, there's no Sky Streak that's an actual Transformer until now anyway. But the weird thing about him is not his name, it is the fact of how his colors work. Because in person, right now, under indoor lights, he looks like some sort of weird blue-purple hybrid. Yet when I take him outside in the sunlight, his purple really starts to mess with my eyes. And here on the camera, at least from what I'm seeing, he's hitting more of that purple hue, but he's still got a strong blue in him also. So the thing about Sky Streak is I got this set because I'm trying to collect all of the Seekers, both the Cybertron and the Earth mode versions, except for like that premium Starscream, because his paint pattern is just swapped around and I don't like it. That aside, this guy is the reason I bought that 4-pack, in addition to wanting the Baliff again and seeing what the Autotrooper was like. So for this guy, I mean, it's your standard Seeker fare, but it's all about his colors that make him stand out. Because a lot of the decos are very similar to Thundercracker. It's just that tint of blue or, you know, blurple that he's got going on that distinguish him from Cracker over here. However, you see what these guys look like side by side now. And moving on to our boy here, I have to ask the question, is this technically the 4th animated figure that we've gotten so far in the Legacy trilogy that we've got going on here? Because obviously you have Prowl, you have Optimus, and now you have Bumblebee. So with this being the animated Autotrooper head, does that technically make this the 4th animated figure? And you know what? The animated head, I don't think it looks terrible on this body. It's probably the lesser of the two that I like, because honestly, I do prefer the Alternator head. I feel that it just suits the more serious kind of siege body that we've got going on here. Because a lot of the animated figures, obviously, they've sculpted them to have a little bit more curvature. And this just basically being the Siege Ironhide, even though this is the Earthrise mold, it's still got a lot of those more serious, more straight edge elements, and it doesn't have the curvature that you would typically find with an animated figure. So that's why I ask about that technicality. However, even though you can see how it's reusing the Ironhide mold, I think it works for this guy. The main hook of buying the 4-pack was the Seeker, most of all. However, he is kind of sunk down to second place with the Baliff, because this guy, if you saw the TikTok that we uploaded, this guy has become my absolute favorite out of the set. And just seeing this mold used for somebody nondescript like an Autotrooper, I like how the white goes really nice with the ice blue, and then you have the black contrasting it. And I think it overall works for this mold, especially because it can be just a Cybertronian vehicle and nobody's going to question it. Now, obviously, the black and white is supposed to tie into the law enforcement theme. I get that. But again, if you guys saw the Tic Tac, oh my God. Yes, the Tic Tac, like the candy. No. Clearly I meant the TikTok. Guys, it's late when I'm filming this, so bear with me if I start falling apart here. Again, if you saw the TikTok, I kind of felt like the black and the white was giving you more NASA vibes than it was law enforcement.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I do like how it has this version of the emblem on him, and also something that maybe it's just me, but I've always liked how they have always picked out the small little details and on every iteration of this, the Centurion drone, Ironhide, how they've always picked out the little missile bits. It's the small little details that make this awesome. Now, like I said, this is probably my favorite iteration of the Autotrooper head, being based on the Alternator version. And like I said before, I think it does totally fit this more serious vibe that this mold puts off. However, the thing that I have noticed about all of these 4-packs is that it's always 3 bad guys with 1 good guy. And I'm like, why is it always that ratio? Because wasn't it the Autobots that usually outnumbered the Decepticons when the franchise very first began, especially with this being a very G1 centric set? So that does kind of surprise me that they haven't flipped that ratio at all. However, when I see Autotrooper like this, undaunted, it makes me think of another Autobot.
I'll take you all alive!
However, in my own personal opinion, I think that's kind of too brutal. That sort of stuff would have been encouraged under Nova Prime's administration, and I personally prefer to think of our Autotrooper being a more heroic type, and instead of destroying his 3 opponents, successfully arresting them. Perhaps with Ironhide being a mentor. My goodness, that was an awful lot of figures that we looked at today. Almost 30 in all. Whew, man. However, that seems to be becoming the vibe of the channel as we just go scattershot all over the timeline and all over every corner of the Transformers universe. But then again, I think I kind of like doing that in these videos. With that being said, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this video. And until next time, guys.
Maximize!